Hello friends, so today we're gonna create a VPC after seeing a couple of theory sessions in VPC. So finally today we are gonna quench your thirst by creating a VPC in one of our region. Um, for friends those who haven't seen my previous video, I would request them to first take a look at all my previous videos and then come and have a look into this because it will be very difficult for you to understand why we are doing, because we won't be touching about each concepts in detail since we have already spoken about it in our previous videos. So my demo will be quite faster because I'll be creating each and every components and I'll be showing you how to create each and every components of VPC without touching into the theory or concepts about it. So I first request you to watch my previous videos which we have done on VPC and then start watching this video on how to create a VPC. So I have logged in into my AWS console and I'm into my Mumbai region, and this is the dashboard of VPC. So here you will be able to see that launch VPC wizard. This is a pretty straightforward and simple way which AWS offers for you to create your own VPC, but we won't be using this because this uh, has a template, but you won't understand how to create each and every components and how to stitch them together. So we will do it separately and we will stitch them together so that you will have a clear picture on how these components work together. But for your understanding, you can also do this using uh, create a VPC, launch VPC button. So this has four main options. It creates your VPC with a single public subnet, or if I choose this will give you VPC with a public and a private subnet. The third option is VPC with public and private subnets and all the necessary hardwares you require for a VPN access. So for those who don't know what a VPN is, I request you to first watch my video which where we have spoken about VPN and direct connect. And the last option is VPC with a private subnet only and a hardware VPN access. So these are the four different types of templates which VPC provides you. This is a faster way, so you don't have to create your subnets, VPCs, routers separately. So VPC makes your job much easier. But in today's demo, we will be uh, creating these components individually. But once you know how to create these components and you know how to stitch the components together, you can just try your hands on this template as well. So let me go back. So we won't be using this launch VPC wizard. Rather, I will click on VPC, click on your VPCs. So here, as we have discussed, the Mumbai region has a default VPC. We have also spoken about the difference between a default and a non-default VPC. What are all the advantages and disadvantages you get with it? So if I go to the subnets, there are like three subnets for this particular VPC, and all of these are public in nature. And you have a route table which is being created for this VPC. So this VPC comes with all the components. You don't have to worry about anything. So we will quickly create our own VPC now. So this is a name. Let me give some name here. So the name is byte numbers Mumbai VPC, and I have to give a range of IP address. So I will use the same IP address range which we have seen in our demo, which is 10.0.0.0/16. And then I have to choose the IPv6 block. IPv6 block, either I can choose not to have them, or I could choose the second option, which the Amazon provides the IPv6 CIDR block. So in this option, I think the range is /56, right? And this is the range of IP address which Amazon provides you. So we will be just sticking with that for now. Or you can even choose no IPv6 CIDR for it doesn't matter, it depends on your requirement. And the third option we have is Tennessee. Tenancy, you have two options. One is default, one is dedicated. Dedicated will be extra cost for you, so your organization has to actually think whether you need it or not, because that will incur a lot of additional cost. You you mostly use dedicated tenancy when you need to have a more highly secure infrastructure. So in dedicated tenancy, AWS provides you all the hardware's component like routers, which is very specific, which is dedicated to your VPC. It is not shareable. It is not shared across any other VPC. So all the hardware components uh, d- are being installed dedicated for your VPC. So if I look at the I button, it says you can run instances in your VPC on single tenant dedicated hardware. Select dedicated to ensure that instance launch in this VPC or dedicated tenancy instances regardless of the tenancy attributes specified at launch. So basically that's what it means. So when I choose dedicated tenancy, all the hardwares which your instances will be using, it will not be shared across any other VPC. So obviously, since it is allocated specific to your VPC, you have to pay for them. It's not, it doesn't come for cheap. So for demo, we will just stick with the default tenancy. So let me click on create button. So the VPC has been created. So let me go back to our screen. So this is the VPC which we have just created. This comes with the IPv4 CIDR block 10.0.0.16, the IPv6 which is provided by VP's AWS, and it is /56 as we have discussed, and it has also created a route table and a NACL along with it. Okay, and this is not a default VPC, so as you can see here, it differentiates which is a default and which is a non-default VPC. And the next step which we have to do is create subnets for our VPC. So let me click on subnets button and click on create subnet. So by default, you have seen it has three subnets which belongs to the default VPC. So for our VPC which we have just created, I will create one public and one private subnet, right? So let me give a name here. Choose the VPC. So here I will choose a VPC which I have created. Availability zone, I have to give a different availability zone. So since it is in availability zone 1, I will just add this as a name. So 1A, and then IP CIDR block. So I will choose 10.0.1.0/24. So it has to be within the range of the IP address which we have created our VPC. If you remember, we have created our VPC in the range of 10.0.0.0/16. So since I'm creating a subnet inside the VPC, I'm assigning the range as 10.0.1.0/24. And I'm not assigning any IPv6. So let me click create. Now, if you have noticed one thing, we didn't do much. We didn't um, do anything which will make this subnet a public or a private. We are just naming that as public. We have still not configured it anything separately. So I will name this as private, and I have to choose the VPC and availability zone. I will place this in a different availability zone. So I will choose 1B, and let me give a different range of IP address. Let me say 10.0.2.0/24 and create. Let us verify what we have done so far. So we have our public subnet on the range of 10.0.1.0, and we have our private subnet which starts in the range of 10.0.2.0/24. So I hope you know the difference between what is CIDR block and what is /16 and what /24 means. If you don't know, please watch our previous videos on IP addresses and CIDR block. Now, if you have actually noticed, we have created both the public and the private subnet very similar in nature. So there is no difference. Uh, we didn't create a public subnet in a different way, nor we created a private subnet in a different way. So it becomes now by default, both our subnets are private in nature. So if I go to the route table, so it says that 10.0.0.6, the target is local, so it is used for internal communication, and this is for IPv6, right? So by default, it is private. So let me also go to the route table and confirm this. So this is a route table. There are two route tables, so I assume this is the VPC. Let me go to a VPC and check the VPC ID. So yeah, so this is a route table which is allocated to the VPC which we created. So if I go to routes and come down, so there are two routes. One is for local communication, and this is for IPv4 and this is for IPv6. So by default, in non-default VPC, subnets will not have an internet gateway attached by default. So you have to create an internet gateway and attach to that subnet. So that is when your subnet will become a public subnet. So if you have actually seen our previous videos, a public subnet will be attached to an internet gateway, whereas a private subnet by default it is not attached to internet gateway. And we have spoken about NAT devices and how the EC2 instance which is deployed in a private subnet gets inbound access to internet, right? So we won't be going in depth on those topics. So right now let me create an internet gateway first, and I'll assign this internet gateway to our route table. So click on create internet gateway and give some name. So I have created an internet gateway. Now let me assign to this VPC. Alright, so let me go back to my route table, and I have to create two route tables. One is public route table and other is a private route table. So if you actually see, this says this is the main route table. So this is the default route table which AWS provides. So we will create two additional route tables here. So I will name this as public route table, and I will attach this to the VPC which we created and click on create. So since this is a public route table, let me go to routes and edit the routes. And what you have to do is you need to assign this to internet gateway, right? So that's how you make it public. So I'm clicking internet gateway. So it is choosing the default internet gateway which we created. If you haven't created an internet gateway, it will not pop this option. So first you go create an internet gateway, and then just type internet gateway. It will create a prefix called IGW followed by the internet gateway ID. And now click on save routes. Perfect. So now you have created a public route table. Now let us create a private route table. So the steps are same, no difference. So we have two route tables here. These are not the main route table. So these are custom route tables which we created. So if I go to private, so all the connections are local in target, whereas if I click on subnet, I'm attaching a internet gateway to this IP address. Now the next step is we have created our VPC, we have created our subnets, we have created our internet gateways. Now the next step we have to do is associate our subnets to this route table. So click on subnet association and click on edit subnet association, and here we will select public subnet and click on save. And similarly we will click on private route table and click on edit subnet association and select private subnet and click on save. So if I want to create a NAT devices, I can create the NAT devices and I can make an entry into my private route table. Or if you don't want it, if you don't want inbound access, you can choose to ignore them. So now this is how we make a public subnet in your non-default VPC. So first you create a subnet the same way you create a private and public, there is no difference. Then you create an internet gateway, then you create a route table and add a new route for your public, add a third line, and the last step you have to associate your subnet to this route table. So now I can say that this is a public subnet in proper means, and this is a private subnet in proper means. Okay, so now what we will do is we will create an EC2 instance in our non-default VPC. So let me go to EC2 instance. Let me click on launch instance. Select any one. Let me select something in free tier. And next, here I need to select the VPC, proper VPC. And I need to choose on whether I need to deploy my instance in private or public. So let me choose public subnet and click on next and click on add storage, security groups. So we have not created any security group. So let me just say and click on review and launch. So there is no existing key pair. That's fine. We will just create a key pair quickly. So go to EC2, come down, search for key pairs. Click on create key pair. Just click on PPK and here you go. Create this should download a PPK file for you. Now go back to my screen. Let me cancel it and come again. Click on launch. Right, so it automatically choose the key pair. Click on launch instance. So now what we're going to observe is, let me go to the EC2 instance and we will see that this EC2 does not have a public IP address. So let it get started. This is still in pending state. So what you'll observe is once we create a VPC, non-default VPC, and you create any EC2 instance, this will not have a public IP address. This will only have a private IP address for this. So what you have to do, so now this is started, it's running. So if I just, let me maximize this for you. So this does not have a public IP address. In our previous videos, you might have noticed like when we create an EC2 instance, by default, it comes with a public IP address. We did not do anything special for this, but when we create an EC2 instance in a non-default, this does not have an IP v for public IP. This only has a private IP in this. So if you want to deploy a web server in this instance and you want to be accessed over the internet, you have to create an elastic IP address and associate that elastic IP address to this particular VPC. We already have a separate video on how to create an elastic IP address, but let me quickly show you how to do that. Click on elastic IPs, click on allocate elastic IP address and click on allocate. So it has created an elastic IP address for you. Now go to actions and click on associate elastic IP address. Choose the instance which we have just created and click on associate. Now if I go back to my EC2 instance, so here you can see this is the public IP which we just created, right? So if I just come back to elastic IPs, you can see an elastic IP has been associated. Now if I just run any HTTP server in this EC2 instance, I should be able to access this over the internet. So we have whatever we have seen in our previous theory, we are just covering them one by one. So I have told you like whenever you create a web server or web application, you create it in a public subnet, but then the public subnet should be associated to an internet gateway. and you should have a elastic IP or a public IP associated to your EC2 instance. So far so good. Now let us go back to our VPC. So we have seen how to create VPC, how to create subnets, how to create route table, how to create internet gateway, how to create an elastic IP address, and we'll be touching about the concepts of VPN and peering connection in a separate video. We will talk a bit about securities like NACL and security groups. We have seen them in our theory class. We have spoken about it in length and breadth. But I just want you to know that when you create a VPC, the VPC creates a default NACL or NACL for you. You do not have to create one, although you can create if you want to. But VPC, even when you create a non-default VPC, it gives you NACL by default. So if we actually go to the inbound rules, in inbound rules you have for traffic. So we have discussed earlier, by default NACL allows all the traffic, and by default security group denies all the traffic. So if you have remember our previous videos, so that's what you see here. The first line, it says allow all, and the second line says allow all, and the third line and fourth line says deny all. So you might wonder, okay, you have allow all and deny all in the same rule, so what does AWS do, how does it behave in this case? So it all basically depends upon the rule number. So what is the severity? So this is 100, this will be taken the first preference. So if I want, I can add a new inbound rule at the number 90, and I can allow or deny, and that will take the preference when it comes to network. Similarly, if we go to security groups is instance specific. So I need to create a security group per EC2 instance, and I have to create a NACL per VPC. So if you remember our previous theory videos, by now you should be clear in this topic. So when I create a security group, like if you remember when we just create an EC2 instance, we created a security group and we opened the port 22. So this is the one which we just created, allow SSH. Is there any way I can edit? Yeah, so let me give the same name. So this is the default security group which we just created, which will be working on EC2 instance. So any EC2 instance you associate a security group, but NACL that works on the subnet level. So both are different. It is like two different checkposts for two different reasons, right? So if I just go back to my EC2, did we miss something? So we will see rest of the components in a separate videos, because I don't want to touch upon VPC peering in this session itself. It's already 23 minutes. So I'll be talking about VPC peering and VPN in a different video, that it will be easier for you to follow it up. So for now we will end the session today. So I hope you have a very good exposure on how to create your own VPC, and you can immediately start creating your own VPC, and you can start deploying your EC2 instance in your custom VPC. In our next video, we'll be talking about how to connect two different VPCs. So if you have noticed in our theory, your EC2 instance in your first VPC cannot talk to the EC2 instance or any AWS resource in your second VPC. So to connect or to establish a connection between two different VPCs, you need to do something called VPC peering. So that is what we'll be seeing in our next video. But in today's video, we have touched upon all the main components on how to create your VPC, your subnets, your route table, your internet gateway, and how to deploy your EC2 instance in your VPC, and how to assign an elastic IP address to the EC2 instance in your VPC. So this is a pretty good hands-on session. I want you to try this in your free time and write in the comments if you are stuck with any problem. Thank you so much and have a good day.